Hey, what's up, guys? It's good to see you. In this one, we are drawing a chimpanzee, and I only have one encounter in my life when it comes to having anything remotely to do with monkeys or apes or anything like that. So when I was 3 years old, I went to a petting zoo, and they give you the little cups of peanuts or whatever to feed the animals with. And so going through and feeding all the different animals, and came around the corner to this one cage with this itty bitty monkey all by himself, just sitting there chilling, fat and sassy, had all the remnants of peanuts around him. And my 3-year-old self thought, well, hey, like, there's this little guy clearly in need, and I want to give him some food because I'm a good person. And so I go to give him some peanuts, and I reach through the fence to give it to him, and he looks up at me, and he goes, ah! And he grabs me and pulls me through the fence, and my peanuts go everywhere, and I'm shell shocked, and so I'm crying and stuff because it really scared me. And I remember walking away and looking back at that little monkey, and he was just sitting there with his little fat belly and peanuts all over the place, and he was just sitting there just eating away. And I wondered how many unsuspecting victims that monkey claimed in his time at that petting zoo. I just wanted to share that with you because that's my only encounter with anything remotely close to that. So, but in this one, we're gonna draw a chimpanzee, and I'm gonna be taking you guys through my step-by-step process. I'm gonna be going over the outline and framing the form. I'm also going to be going over, layering different types of charcoal, from soft charcoal, medium charcoals, hard charcoals. I'm going to be explaining the difference between all of those. I'm going to be showing you how you can really convey hair as opposed to skin textures. And yeah, overall, we're just going to be having a whole hell of a lot of fun talking about different techniques and how to convey those techniques on paper. So I'm gonna have links to all the tools that I use in this tutorial in the description of this video, and I hope it helps. That's it. Let's jump into this lesson. Alright, so for this one, we're going to be using a graphite pencil. We're going to be using a 3/16 and a size 2 smudger, as well as a soft, medium, and hard rated charcoal pencil. Yes. We're also going to be using an Ohuhu, a Pentel Click, and Mono Zero eraser, as well as a sandpaper strip and a extra piece of paper for checking our tones before we lay them down onto the actual drawing. And last but not least, our good old size 6 brush. Okay, so the first step with any drawing, regardless of what that drawing is going to be, is that we need to iron out the basic shape of our reference image. And it's important to note here that shape plays a very important role in the creation of art. It helps to create complex drawings. So your shape will affect the composition, and it will contribute to basically the balance of the work itself. And shape is, of course, a two-dimensional area that will eventually be defined by those changes in value that we manipulate through the buildup and layering of our different tones. So now I know this is the first chimpanzee that I've drawn. And the big thing when you look at this reference image is, as you can see, obviously there's the main face. And the big thing with this is when you look at it, you do have the brow, and you have the eyes and the nose and the mouth of the chimp. You also have the ears. But for the most part, the overall texture, especially the texture that we will finish with, is very furry. It's almost like a wiry fur. And so here what we want to do is we want to make sure that we really give a good shape to those parts of the drawing above the fur. You can think of the fur as being kind of an arbitrary piece of the drawing. And then that doesn't mean that we don't want the fur to look like it looks in the reference image, but the point that I'm trying to make is that there are certain parts of this reference image that are more important than other parts of it. And so that's one of the reasons why we're outlining the forehead and the ears and the mouth above the hair. So okay, so that's pretty much all we're going to do. And now what we're doing is we are doing what I like to call framing, the underlying form of our outline here. And what this does is this basically gives us the feel and the direction of that third dimension, because as I've noted in previous classes, you know, an outline or a shape, and even a drawing when it's completely finished, will only ever be in two-dimensional space. And so it's your job as the artist to really be able to bring out that third dimension in your techniques. And that's what will separate you from the rest, so to speak. But the big thing with these lines is they're just a guide. That's really all they are. You can put as many or as little of these form frame lines as you would like. But basically what this allows for is this takes us from a two-dimensional framework with just our basic outline to a three-dimensional framework. And then here, just kind of clean this up a little bit. That's pretty much all we need. Okay, so now we got our tone check paper, and what I've done is I've actually taken my soft charcoal and I've grinded it onto the sandpaper strip here. And now I'm going to take my number 6 brush. I'm just going to load it up, and I'm going to do a little tone check and make sure I have the right amount of charcoal, and we're going to start slinging some charcoal here. Okay, so now the big part in this step is to target your lower values first. And you also want to make sure that you are using a very, very light pressure control, because we want this charcoal in this base layer to rest on top of the paper, so to speak. We don't want it to be pressed into the paper, because when we go back on our next step and retrieve higher values with our Monozor eraser, it's going to be much easier to retrieve a higher value if the charcoal is just resting on top of the paper. If you push it in and if you're using too much pressure control with your brush and you really push that charcoal into the paper, it's going to be much harder to retrieve a higher value. So just keep that in mind. But one of the reasons why we're using the soft charcoal as opposed to say a medium charcoal or a hard charcoal, those of you that have been following me for a while already understand this, but for those who haven't, I'm going to explain it again. Soft charcoal has the least amount of binder in it, and because of that, it spreads the easiest onto the paper. And then as you progress up the charcoal scale from medium to hard, they gradually have more and more binder in it, and thus they are harder and harder to spread. But now here what I'm doing is I've taken my Monozor eraser, and this is what they call retrieving. So what I'm doing is I'm going back through, and this is the second layer in building the proper texture that we see with chimpanzees. But the trick to this step is to just make sure that you are using your reference as much as possible, and that you are adhering to the flow of the hair, and not only the flow of the hair, but also the length of each individual hair. That's a big thing that a lot of artists tend to overlook. You know, they're doing really long pulls with their eraser when they should be doing shorter strokes, right? Shorter pulls. But just go into this technique understanding that it is the 3-layered method, and because of that, it is very much just that. It is a layering process, right? Okay, so now the Ohuhu eraser. This is a battery-operated eraser, and you can actually do so many cool things with this eraser. Now, here what I've done is you can see there's kind of a weird texture on this part of the chimpanzee's arm, so I want to make sure that that I'm able to convey that with the Ohuhu eraser. Okay, now here what I'm doing is I'm taking my brush and I'm just very lightly hitting all of the work that I've just done. And this is more for just gradation. I just want to make sure that I'm getting a nice blend. Okay, so now we're going to switch it up, and we are going with a hard charcoal. And like I was mentioning before, with the differences between soft, medium, and hard charcoals, is that hard charcoal is the exact opposite of soft charcoal. It has the most amount of binder in it. And if you remember back to the value video where I went into depth as to the actual differences between soft, medium, and hard charcoal and how they convey different aesthetics onto the paper, hard charcoal, because it has all of that binder in it, it actually throws a slightly higher value. And the thing about it is perfect for hair texture in that it holds together. So much of the time with different charcoal pencils, depending on the rating, a harder charcoal will stick together more. You know, the tip won't break as you run it across the paper. And the softer you go, the more those tips break off because there's not nearly as much binder in them, right? There's not nearly as much glue in the charcoal. So that's something to be aware of. But here, as you can see, the hard charcoal gives us a really, really nice look onto the paper when it comes to trying to bring out kind of that wiry looking hair that we see here on the chimp's arm. And again, same principle as with when you were retrieving your higher values with your Monozer eraser. Just pay attention to the length, and you can actually use the high values that you retrieved with your Monozer eraser as kind of a cheat, right? Kind of a guide. Just highlight those with your hard charcoal, and that will allow you to do a couple things. It'll allow you to stay true to what is actually being conveyed, and it'll also help you move quicker, right? Because you don't have to think nearly as much. But now here what I'm doing is I'm just taking my hard charcoal, and as you can see from the reference image, we do have hair coming off the side of the chimp's face here. So this is also one of the reasons why I left a lighter value right along the chimp's face in regards to the arm, is because I wanted to be able to really bring out this look. But then here I'm just going to run a nice defined line, nothing too heavy. I want to make sure this has a nice light line quality. But what this does is this essentially brings the side of the chimp's face and his nose and his mouth forward, right? It brings it closer and it pushes the chimp's arm back. And so now, because that line is there, it kind of gives us some depth to the drawing. So, and then just like this, just run it from that defined line that we just laid down. Again, this is a hard charcoal. And just pull, just short little throws. Make sure that with each pull, you give the proper spacing between each one of those little pulls. And if you need to stop and make sure that your hard charcoal pencil is sharp, if it's getting dull on you, go ahead and do that. Stop, sharpen up, and then begin again. But then here I wanted to put a line right there, and that's for the forehead. But if you're laying down, you know, this furry texture, and you're thinking to yourself, that looks really gritty, I don't like that, don't worry, because we're going to be able to go in with our brush, and we're going to be able to soften all that up. Okay, now here, we're not done with this arm yet. This is a medium charcoal, and as you can see from what it's throwing, this is a much lower value than the higher value that we were seeing being thrown down onto the paper with the hard charcoal. And of course, the reason why is because it has less binder in it, right? So there's more charcoal being thrown. Medium charcoal is a nice Goldilocks between the soft and the hard. And the cool thing about the medium charcoal is because there is less binder in it than the hard charcoal, when you go to hit it with the brush, it blends really nicely. But if you look at the reference image, you can see as we go towards the armpit, the inside of the chimp's arm, the value does gradually get lower and lower. So we want to make sure that we speak to that. And this is that 3-layered method in action. So here we are. Here's the brush. I'm just taking this, just very lightly hitting this, and I'm just getting a nice gradation effect across all of these different values. And this is speaking to those value relationships, but it's also conveying a soft look for us. And if that looks a little bit too soft, don't worry. I'm going to show you a trick as to how we can still keep the soft look somewhat and keep that gradation, but still bring out that wiry look to the hair, because this hair it's thin but it's coarse, right? So I'll show you how we can convey that. If you think that after you've hit it with your brush, your chimp's arm looks a little too soft. But the big thing with this is just use your best judgment. I mean, one of the beautiful things that I love about drawing is that no one drawing ever looks quite the same. And that's just like us, right? None of us are exactly the same. And that's what makes us beautiful. So here we are. Just going through, and I'm really just sticking to the lower values and building those up. Now I'm just going to hit this just real light pressure control here. Brush is one of your most powerful tools, and it's very easy to get in over your head with it. You don't want to erase all the detail that you just spent time building, so nice and light like a fairy. Okay, so now I got some runaway charcoal here. This is where I want my drawing to end, so I'm gonna just clean this up. There we go. We're moving right along here. Moving right along. Okay. So now here I've switched out my medium charcoal for a nice hard charcoal. And as you can see, the hard charcoal, because it has all that binder and it rests really nice on top of all the other charcoal, even though we've already laid down a layer of hard and then we've blended it with our brush. Because there's so much binder in it, it likes to lay nice on top of all that other charcoal that has gradation to it, because we've hit it with the brush already. Okay, so now remember how I was talking about how if it looks too soft, too much gradation, you can go ahead and you can kind of make it look wiry? Well, this is how we're going to accomplish that. We're just going through, and we're making sure that we have a nice sharp tip, and as you can see, it starts to all of a sudden make it look harsher, right? More wiry, more like the reference image. So this is a trick that it'll really depend on what you're drawing, but if you ever have an animal that you're drawing where it has a real, like a lot of coarse hair, like say like a yak, this is a trick that you can use. Okay. And then here, notice how we have some lower values. This is kind of defining the slight muscle structure of the deltoid of this chimp. So just real light, just kind of hit it like that. Bing, bada, boom. And there we are. Pretty much everything that you'll do with the brush is going to have a real light pressure control. Okay, so now remember how I was mentioning this? How I was saying if this is kind of gritty, don't worry about that. Well, this is how you do it. You just hit it real light. Put a nice blend on that hair. There you are. Boom. Immediately softens it up. And you can also go back through with your Mono Zero eraser if it looks too clumpy and you want it to be more wiry or more wispy. I'll show you how to do that. But then here you just take your hard charcoal and you just go through, make sure it's sharp, make sure you have a real sharp tip on your pencil. And this is where you can kind of go through and you can start to break up that hair that's coming off the backside of the chimp's face here. And kind of build this line up, kind of give it a thicker line quality. Just a fine line here. There we are. Okay, now moving on. So this is our smudger. This is my 3/16. This is the little guy. But little smudgers are good. You know why? More control, more pinpoint control. You don't have a lot of control with the brush. You're able to move quickly with the brush, but only in areas of more surface area. Now with the smudger, what we're doing is we're building this ear, right? Now I could go in with a pencil, but I find that a lot of times pencils will be a little bit too harsh. Where with smudgers, especially if you use a light pressure control, you can go in and set the foundation for a lower value, like what we did in the inside of the ear, and then the top of the chimp's ear. And then you can build on that. But then here's another trick. Now I could have hit this entire top of the head with a base layer of soft charcoal with the brush, like I did for the arm. Or another trick, if you like, let's say maybe you're uncomfortable with the brush and you want a little bit more control, this is how you can start to build that base layer. And you see how there's like how I'm pulling up and down, left to right, always keeping in mind the direction that I'm pulling, right? Because I want that flow to match my reference image so that it's accurate, or as accurate as I can get it. This is a way that you can do that. And you can still go back through and hit it with your Mono Zero eraser and really start to get those really sharp, tight lines. But that's a trick. That's another way that you can basically accomplish the same thing when it comes to base layering. Okay, so now I'm going to switch out that smudger for a medium charcoal pencil, and I'm just going in. I'm just kind of building this up, and I really want to have as much control as I can. So sharp pencils, tiny little 3/16 smudgers. They really do wonders for us. Okay, now here I'm just taking my Mono Zero eraser and I'm just gonna kind of clean this up. I'm gonna retrieve this higher value here that runs along the edge of this here. There we go. Okay. But then here, this is just to add some detail. Just kind of clean that up. Okay. Now I'm going to add a little bit longer hairs. If you actually look at the reference image, there's different lengths of hair. There's ones that are longer and go off the side, and then there's a lot more that are shorter. So this is just kind of just trying to pay as close attention as you can to just different detail work. Like here, for example, looks like there's some fuzzy wuzzies coming off of the chimp's ear. So we want to make sure that we speak to that with our hard charcoal. Okay, now this is where we start to add detail work to the hair on the top of this chimp's head. So here what I'm doing is I'm just taking my hard charcoal and I'm just being conscious of the flow, and I'm just starting and I'm pulling. And as you can see, you see how that texture is starting to come out. Literally all we have is we have soft charcoal, and then we have hard charcoal on top of that. And now here what I'm doing is I'm taking my smudger and I'm just very lightly touching the paper because I want to start to build up kind of a light base layer for the forehead. so that it starts to have some cohesivity right across the forehead, and then how it blends into the hair. That's looking good. And then this is what I was talking about. So obviously when you lay down the base layer with your smudger, if you want to go that route instead of the brush, you don't have to hit the second layer and retrieve your high values with your mono zero eraser nearly as much. You just kind of hit it and it's just there. And then here, if you want to go through and you kind of want to break up this hair that's coming off the side of the chimp's face, you can do that. You can do that. There we go. And then just real light, just kind of hit this, kind of blend this hair a little bit, soften it up. Even though it's wiry, it is still hair at the end of the day, so by nature, it will be softer. But then I hope you're starting to see when it comes to the hair that it's just like any other part of the drawing. You're building it up, right? Layer after layer after layer. Start with soft, and then immediately, because of the nature of this specific reference image, hit it with hard charcoal. Unless you're like down in the armpit or something like that, where you need a really, really low value, you're not going to need to touch the drawing with your medium charcoal as far as the hair is concerned. Okay, and then after we have that blend, just continue to go back through with your hard charcoal and be conscious of the flow, right? The direction that the hair is flowing from the reference image. That will make or break you. So make sure that you're paying conscious attention to that. Above all else, just make sure you're paying attention to that, because if you can nail the direction, your drawing will look as much like the reference image as you can get it. So a lot of times in drawing, it's more knowing what to prioritize and what to pay attention to over other things. So, and just real quick, as you can see, just one hit when it comes to the hair. Just hit it, and that's it. Okay. So do a little tone check, load up on some soft charcoal here. Okay. Now what we're going to do is we're going to start building up the forehead here. And when you look at the reference image, this is the part of the drawing that is going to take the most finesse, right? This is where we're going to be spending the majority of our time. Hair, for the most part, when you understand how to do it, you can haul and just you can move very quickly. But with the forehead here, and this is going to take a little bit more focus. So what I'm doing is I'm looking at the reference image, and everywhere there's a crease, right, or a line or a wrinkle in the brow of the chimp, that is where I want to put my charcoal first. Okay, and for those of you that have been drawing with me for a while, you already understand why. But for those of you that maybe this is your first tutorial with me, one of the reasons why I do that is because you always want, for the most part, 95% of the time, you always want to build your lower values first. Because if you can build your lower values first, the higher values will take care of themselves. So now here, I actually didn't like the way that looked. So I'm going to erase the whole thing. And now that I have my other parts of the drawing solidified, now I can really go in and get a much more accurate outline of the chimp's eye. And this is one of the big things that I absolutely love, and this is what I tell a lot of my students: your outline does not have to be perfect, okay? Don't ever think that your outline is set in stone. Here we are, I'm, almost a third of the way done with this drawing, and I'm erasing a very critical part of this animal, and that is the eye, right? But it's okay, I can do that. And now that I've done that, now that I've solidified where all my charcoal needs to go, because this, the outline is very much the framework for my charcoal, now I can start to continue to build what I need to build and get a very accurate drawing. But you see where we're laying down that charcoal. We're building those lower values first, and the higher values and the mid values are going to be taking care of themselves. Now, with all of my drawings, I draw them twice, sometimes 3 times, depending on exactly what it is that I'm drawing. But that's just because I love drawing. So, if your chimp isn't turning out exactly how you want it to, don't worry about that. Just do your best, and then if you want to do it again, do it again. Repetition. Repetition leads to mastery, but you have to be very repetitive. The habituation of your effort over and over and over again will make you better. Inherently. It's just the way it goes. I draw for hours and hours on drawings that never even make it onto the channel. They never even make it into videos. But it's the simple fact that I love drawing. And that's why I do it. But now here, you see how we're starting to build the brow of this chimp? And because I have that lower value on top of the brow, it brings that brow forward, right? And so now here what I'm doing is I'm taking a hard charcoal. And the reason why I'm using a hard charcoal for this part as opposed to the medium charcoal is because I need to make sure that my tip doesn't break off. A lot of times when you look at not just chimpanzees, but all forms of apes and monkeys, is that they have a lot of detail in and around their eyes, right? It's their face, and they have a lot of wrinkles and such. So the hard charcoal allows us to make sure that we have a nice, sharp pencil tip, and that we can go through and we can start to add these little details, these little wrinkles, and these differences in high and low values. Value relationships are key when it comes to the chimpanzee's eyes. And around the eyes and the forehead especially. So, but the forehead, as with the hair, is very much a layering process, right? We don't do it all at once. That's one of the reasons why this technique has the type of aesthetic that people seem to like, is because it is just layer upon layer upon layer. So now see here, what I'm doing is I'm taking my hard charcoal and I'm building up. I'm building up all of the different wrinkles first, right? Wrinkles first, and then everything else will follow. Because if we can solidify where those wrinkles are, the wrinkles are what we're going to use to really bring out the form of the brow of this chimp. And then here, below the eye, if you look at the reference image, you can see how it is a lower value than other parts. But you can do cross-hatching too. That's another trick. If you get into an area or a spot of the drawing where there's just not a lot of room to work, but you still need to convey wrinkles, cross-hatch. That's what I'm doing in certain parts of this drawing. Okay. So now I've switched it up for a medium charcoal. And you can see why. When you look at the reference image right in front the eye here, there is an area that requires a much lower value to be conveyed. And because medium charcoal has less binder in it than hard charcoal, that's what I want to switch to. I just want to slowly build this up. And not just in front of the eye, but anywhere where there's a wrinkle. A lot of times the way the light hits the chimpanzee's face, there's not going to be hardly any light going into those wrinkles. So that's one of the reasons why you want to build the wrinkles first, define them with your hard charcoal, and then you can go in and start to build the shadow work with your medium charcoal. Here I'm just putting some defined lines right here. All right, now it's time to get this eye taken care of. So there's the center of the eye. I'm gonna pull that out. And now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna stand my pencil on its side, and I'm just gonna start pulling from the very bottom of the bottom eyelid, and I'm just gonna pull up. I'm just gonna pull up, and I'm gonna do this very lightly, okay? A lot of people tend to use too much pressure control, and so they actually end up scratching the paper and ruining their drawings. So you just want to put a nice light layer of medium on there, and then go in with your 3/16 smudger, right? Because you have the most control, because it's the smallest smudger you have in your arsenal, and then go through and just start to blend. And even with the smudger, don't push. Don't push. Let your tools work for you. Let them do their job. They want to smudge that charcoal, so you don't need to push very hard at all. And then once you have your first layer smudged in, you can go in, same thing, nice light pressure control, and you can put even more medium charcoal in there. And of course, this will convey a lower and lower value. Then again, go in, you lay down your charcoal. Now you're going to smudge it with your 3/16 smudger. And these eyes, I know one of the reasons why I chose this reference image is because these eyes are different, huh? Like most eyes don't have this low of a value in relation to the rest of the drawing. So it was a little different, and so that's why I chose it. But I mean, if you are more on the beginning side of the drawing spectrum, and then this is a perfect drawing for you to try out. But as you can see, you can hit a lot of that skin and stuff around the eye, and you can blend it with your smudger. And then here, just real light. I'm just going to hit this with our brush. See how it kind of softens it up. And we're just going in with our hard charcoal, and we're continuing to put just little creases, you know, any kind of detail work, right? That's what this is. This is just detail work. These are tiny little lines, tiny little pulls that, you know, your viewer might not even pick up. Subconsciously, they might not even pick it up, but you'll know they're there. And this is also one of the reasons why you want to be very light when you're smudging this part of your drawing with your smudger, or if you're hitting it with your brush, right? Then here I'm just going to put a nice little defined line. This is another crease in the forehead as the brow of this chimp moves along. And then here, if you notice, you see how there's kind of that weird texture on the brow. Well, this is how we're going to convey that. We're going in with our hoo-hoo eraser, because we just want to be able to touch the paper and then lift, you know, retrieve, right? That high value in places that we need it. And we want to move quickly. That's the big thing. Okay. And I'm just taking my mono zero eraser here, just retrieving any values. And actually, this needs to be a lot lighter, so I'm going to go in. I'm actually gonna lighten this up. Retrieve this. And now I'm going to go in with my hard charcoal, and I'm just going to go in and kind of put in some line work that needs to be put in, you know, as far as the detail goes with the wrinkly skin underneath the chimp's eye here. That looks much more accurate to the reference image. But when it comes to detail work on chimpanzees, your hard charcoal is your friend. You'll find that you're going to use hard charcoal way more with drawing chimpanzees than anything else. And a big reason for that is because of the nature of the skin in this specific reference image. So, okay, so now I'm going to put a defined line right there. A little bit more detail work. And you can spend literally hours making this look as perfect as you want. But for time constraints, I can only show so much before I have to move on. Because normally I'd spend hours on this, but I don't have the time. Okay, so now here what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a little defined line right there, and that's just to kind of solidify where that nose is going to be. But then here what I'm doing is I'm going with my mono-zero eraser, and if you look at the reference image, there are slight tonal variations as far as light's concerned with the eye. So this is how we speak to that. Real subtle. There we go. Just hit this real light. Get a nice blend. And here's the thing, is you can dab. If you don't want to brush, if you just want to dab with your brush, you can do that. It'll still give you a form of gradation while at the same time keeping more of your charcoal on the paper. So that's a little brush trick that you can use if you want. Okay. So now, I'm switching it up, and I'm using my number 2 smudger. So, because what I'm doing now is I'm looking at the reference image, and I am focusing on how the brow of this chimp flows over the top of the other eye. And of course, I'm focusing on the flow and the roundness of that brow. As you can see, it's very round. So I want to make sure that I'm able to convey that, and this is how I'm able to convey that. Notice the direction that I'm pulling my smudger across the paper, because that is how I make it look rounded like this. Just nice and light. Remember, you can continually build on your lower values. You don't need to have it be as low as you want to go right off the bat. Just layer of charcoal upon layer of charcoal, and those values will get lower and lower. I'm just cleaning this up, solidifying exactly where I want that eye to be. And then here's another cool trick in the wake of trying to convey the form of something. I can just hit this, and I'm pulling my mono-zero eraser in the same direction that I laid down the charcoal with my smudger. Okay, so just be aware of that. And then here, much like with the other eye, I'm just going through and I'm just solidifying exactly where I want the outline of that eye to be. With the eye, you can also solidify the wrinkles immediately under the eye, exactly where you want those to be. And I have found over the years of drawing that when you go through, because we're not committed yet, remember, when you go through and you do it and you do this, you erase the previous outline, and then you really solidify it. Now that you have a lot of the drawing done, your drawing will be better for it, right? And this is why I've always said you are not committed at the outline step. Don't be afraid. There's nothing wrong with going through and erasing what you put down already. There's nothing wrong with that at all. It'll benefit you more often than not. So just keep that in mind. Okay, so we've switched back. We don't have our number 2 smudger. We have our 3/16 again, because we want a lot of control, especially because we're in a nice tight space. And we're just building up those lower values. Low values first. And that way the low values will take care of the medium values and the high values. Okay, and I see this, the other had the line, and now I'm pulling up. That gives us almost like a round look. And that's the technique that you want to use for all of the wrinkles, right? Because that will give each wrinkle a nice rounded look. And then of course you can go back in with your medium and hard charcoals, and you can put really tiny like wrinkles on top of the wrinkles and stuff like that, so you get that texture that we see a lot in chimpanzee skin. So, but see how I'm going through and I'm just loading up and grabbing more and more charcoal, and I'm continually building those lower tones. The big trick with that is, again, pressure control. Nice light pressure control. But when you're looking at the reference image, just start to draw any of the places that do have that lower value. Now we're seeing this with our number 6 brush, softening it all up real nice, blending it. Okay, so now I'm going to take my hard charcoal. We're going to solidify this eye. There we go. So I did it up over the bottom. So I did it on the bottom eyelid. And now I'm going to do it up over the top. There we are. And in this specific drawing, I would recommend, when it comes to your line work, run your line work with a hard charcoal. Don't run it with a medium charcoal, unless of course it's a really heavy line, because the hard charcoal will give you a tighter line, right? Now here I'm just solidifying my higher values. And then check this out. We can run our smudger right along that defined line that we laid down with the hard charcoal. And that gives us that defined eyelid. But you know, when it comes to line work, you know, a lot of these softer lines that we see in the drawing, those are implied. You know, and a lot of them as well are defined. All the wrinkles, those are all defined lines. Okay, so now here I'm going to go back through, because I want this line to have a higher line quality. I'm going to hit it with my medium charcoal and really bring out that line. And now I'm going through and I really need a lot of control. So I'm going through, not with my smudger, but with my pencil, and I'm building up those lower values. And it's looking good. Okay. Now same with the left eye. Notice how I'm holding my pencil, how I'm holding it sideways, and then I'm starting from the bottom eyelid, and then I'm pulling up. Again, light pressure control. It looks gritty, and that's fine, because we're going to hit it with our smudger, and we're going to blend it real nice. Just like this. Again, light pressure control. Think of it this way: whenever you're drawing, you hardly ever need to push hard, especially with this technique. Just drill it into the back of your mind. If you push hard, you risk ruining your drawing. Remember, light like a fairy. There, this is looking good. See how I went through and I blended all of that charcoal that I laid down with my medium charcoal with the smudger. And now all of a sudden I have a nice rounded brow over my Chimp's eyes. And then just like the other side, I'm going through and I'm messing with those tonal variations in the eye. Now I'm just hitting this whole surrounding area with the brush, really. Just want to blend it all up. Get a nice gradation. Now I'm taking my hoo-hoo because there is a definite need to retrieve some of my higher values here. So this is how we can do that. And the thing with the hoo-hoo eraser is as you use it more and more, you'll get more proficient at it. It won't be so much for you to handle. But here, check this out. See how I'm taking my hoo-hoo and I'm just, boom, just like that. Now we got a really, really nice high value underneath the eyes. But then here's another trick with the mono zero. Just go through and just pull it in the same direction. It's almost like you're hashing, right? But at the same time, subconsciously the viewer's eye will pick that up and it'll give the chimp's face some form. But now what I'm doing is I'm going through and I'm doing detail work, right? So I'm going through and I'm just doing short little throws, and this is where the detail work really comes out in this technique. I mean, if you look at the reference image, you can see this chimp has a lot of wrinkles on his face, especially under his eyes. So now we're running a define line here. And these define lines are the bottom of these wrinkles, right? So you run the line. And we can go back through too. I'm gonna be showing you how you can mess with the line quality and you can mess with the line weight on these and really get these wrinkles to kind of have some sass, right? Have kind of their own look. So, but main lines, right? Low values. Target them first. And then here, check this out. So watch this. So I'm going to build up right here. See, now this is where I'm going to talk about line quality. So line quality is, for those of you that don't know, line quality is the thickness or thinness of a line. And by varying the line quality, like what I'm doing right here, artists can show form in a drawing with literally just the use of the line. Notice how the line isn't the same width all the way through. Well, if you look at the reference image, it's not the same width in the reference image either. On this side where my smudger's at right here, it's thicker. And then as it goes and curls towards the nose, it gets thinner, right? That's what that means. And then line weight, which is different from line quality, line weight is used to describe the strength of a line or how light or dark it appears on the paper. So basically, how high in value is it or how low in value is it? So that line that we were just working on with the smudger, that would be a very dark line weight, right? Okay, so now we're switching it up for the hard charcoal, and you can see, like, look on the paper, you can see how there is a very big difference between what your medium charcoal lines look like versus what your hard charcoal lines look like. And that's the difference in the amount of binder. And it's just knowing how to use each of them in tandem with one another so that you can convey the best kind of texture that you can. And another big thing that I don't know if you've noticed this in this drawing is when it comes to the wrinkles, especially in your chimp's face, make sure that you're starting to build the line work, all the wrinkles, right, on a mid to higher value as far as your base layer is concerned. So that's one of the reasons why I hit all of my wrinkles with a base layer with my smudger first, right? And then here, if you mess up and your brow is not quite where you want it, just hit it with the mono zero eraser. Embrace mess ups. A lot of you guys have heard me say that drawing's a lot like life that way. You learn a lesson with every drawing. Just like through most of the days of our lives, we learn very valuable lessons that we didn't know before. There is very much a parallel between how drawing is done and how living is done, in my opinion. Okay, we just did some cross-hatching right there. And that's what I meant for areas of your drawing where there's just so many wrinkles. You're like, here, I'm just gonna cross-hatch this real quick, and it'll look convincing enough to your viewer. Okay. All right, so now the nose. I grab my number 2 smudger, and again, targeting the lowest value. So if you look at this part in the drawing, the lowest value is that crease. It's that crease on top of the nose, and then we have some mid to lower values coming away from the light source on the right side of this nose, right? So nice and light, not pushing hard. If you want to convey a lower value right off the bat, stay over that area, but don't push. Pressure control does not vary. Pressure control remains light. If you want to convey a lower value next to, like, say, a medium value, you just continue to work that part of the paper, and it will get darker. You don't need to push. Just stay where you are, right? That's the trick to that. And then here, see, we're starting along that line. We're just pulling. Okay. Then here, I'm just going to run it along this side. Then I'm going to pull down. And if this looks too soft, don't worry, because I'm going to be going in and we're going to be adding some defined lines, and we're really going to make this nose pop. So here we are. Take my medium charcoal pencil, and I'm going to start right here. Put a nice defined line right there. Boom. There's that line, right? And then I'm going to define this line right here. I'm going to start here. I'm going to pull up and away. There we are. Boom. Just like that, all of a sudden, there's our nose. Then here on this side, this is a little tricky, but we're going to start right here. Up and over. Up and over. Boom. There it is. There's the defined lines for our nose. And then we can start to pull immediately away from that line. Pull from the line down. Because if you look at the reference image, we do have very, very low value right there. And we also have that same type of low value on the right side of the nose as well. But here, anywhere, if you want to convey a lower value, you can do that with your medium charcoal pencil, right? Because this is a tight spot. I recognize that, so I don't want to go in with a smudger. I want to have pinpoint control here. And I can go in, because this looks gritty, right? I can go in and I can hit this with a smudger or a brush. More in this specific area, I'm probably going to hit it with a smudger. Here we are. I'm just going to blend this. Again, light pressure control. Light pressure control. Let your tools do their job. They want to do their job. That's why they were made. To do their job is to blend this charcoal. Your job as the artist is to simply tell it where it needs to do its job, but don't force it. There we are. See how we get a nice blend, and all of a sudden that grittiness goes away? And this is how we convey that. And this is what I call pinpoint shadowing. You're going through, and then right here, see this line? What I want to do is I want to push the charcoal away from the line, just on the one side. Just on the one side. If you look at the reference image, there is a very, very high value on the right side of that crease on top of the nose, so we don't need to put it on both sides, just the left. And we're just going through and blending this all together. We're having a great time. Yes, that looks good. It's looking pretty. Looking like a chimpanzee. Very nice. Okay. But then here too, you can start to pull, and you can start to form the chimp's mouth, right? His upper lip and his cheeks. Then here, if you look at the reference image, you see how there's some creases. These are medium values. Okay, that's looking good. So now, brush, very light, right? Very light. Just blend, a couple of hits, that's it. That's all it takes. Just a couple hits. Okay. So now I'm gonna take my hard charcoal here, and I'm actually gonna define that a little bit more. There's a crease right there. And a crease right here. And this is another thing with this technique, guys, is if you notice something and you want to go back and you want to solidify it or change it up, you can do that. You know, Leonardo da Vinci was famous for that, for saying take a break and come back to your piece, and you'll notice something about it that maybe you didn't notice before. I'm a firm believer in that. So, okay, so now base layer, so you know the drill. Number 6 brush, soft charcoal, and when you look at this, you'll notice this part of the reference image, there are lower values. So what are we doing? We are targeting those lower values first. Lower values in every segment of the drawing, from base layering on through to building up values and solidifying those value relationships, right? But this is just the base layer. We're going to go back through with our mono zero eraser, and we're going to retrieve all of our high values because we're not using a heavy pressure control, right? We're wanting this charcoal to rest on top of the paper, real light. Okay, here we are, mono zero eraser time. So now, and another trick to the mono zero eraser with this part is if you actually take a razor and you clip the end of the mono zero eraser at a diagonal, that'll give you a really sharp edge to work with, so you can really get into those nice tight spots that you need to for when you're retrieving your higher values. But the direction that you pull is crucial in this step, right? And then check this out. If you start from the bottom of the lip and you pull up, all of a sudden we're giving that lip that curl, right? And this is what I'm talking about as far as like the direction that you pull, even when you're retrieving your high values. And then here you can do a little bit of cross hatching. It's okay because we're going to hit it with a brush and we're going to blend it. Again, this is just a single layer in the process. So just real light. Blend that. It's looking good. Okay, so now if you look at the reference image, what we have is we have some creases, just like with the face of this chimp. His mouth, right, very much has creases in it as well, and some deep creases. These are low values here, so we want to make sure that we bring those out. There we go, that's starting to come together. And take your time with this step. You've heard me say in other videos that the more time you take with your drawing, the more accurate it will be. And honestly, drawing's so much fun, why would you want to rush through it, right? This is our zen, this is how we find our center sometimes. So we want to enjoy it. But now what I'm doing is I'm taking my 3/16 smudger and I'm just very lightly going over those lines that I just put down with my medium charcoal. And this just kind of gives it a blend because, you know, these lines aren't abrupt, they actually go into the skin. And so this is a way for us to, you know, kind of convey that same look that we see in the reference image. And then you see this trick right here. See how I'm going just back and forth, little circles. What this is doing is this is smudging. This is smudging that charcoal around, and it's actually giving us kind of that blotchy, wrinkly skin look that you see in the reference image, right? So that's a little trick that you can do to get this type of look onto your paper. Now what I'm doing is I'm just building up the bottom of the top lip here of the chimp. I'm just going to clean this up. This charcoal is getting away from us, so I just want to define this. This is an implied line, right? It's too soft to be a defined line, but it is very much a line. And then here's another trick, that grittiness, right? This is what we're going to do. We're going to take our hard charcoal, we're going to put it on its side, and we're going to start spinning it in tight little circles, and we're barely touching the paper. Think of it as you're caressing the paper, right? You just want to barely hit it. You don't need to press very hard at all. But what this does is this just adds another layer and it contributes to the depth of the texture that we see on the upper lip of this chimp. And if it looks a little bit too gritty, don't worry, because in certain parts you can hit that with the brush, and the grittiness will still be there depending on how much pressure control you use with the brush. Okay. So now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my hard charcoal pencil, and I'm going to start putting in these wrinkles that come up. And this is basically solidifying where the top lip ends, in conjunction with the lower lip and the opening of the mouth here. So now I want to use a hard charcoal, because if I used a medium charcoal for that step, those wrinkles would be too abrupt. It wouldn't look as accurate as it could to our reference image. But then here I'm just going through and I'm putting in those wrinkles that we see in the skin. And honestly, with this chimpanzee, you could spend hours nailing every last wrinkle, but we're pressed for time here in this tutorial, so I'm going to put a little defined line right there, and then here, for the opening, the mouth, it's right about there, and then I'm just going to bring this out and pull it straight. Boom. There we are. There's a nice light line weight and a thin line quality. And then here, I'm going to take my hard charcoal and I'm going to start to bring out the roundness of that lower lip. As you can see, the lower lip is quite a bit bigger than that tight upper lip. So this is how we bring that out. Then here I'm just building up on the quality of this line, right? I'm just making it a little thicker. I'm building up the line weight. If you haven't noticed, there is a definite correlation between line quality and line weight as far as what they are by definition. If a line has a thicker quality, it's going to have a darker appearance. And if it has a lighter line quality or a thinner line quality, it's going to have a lighter line weight. So just keep that in mind. Okay, hit it with a brush real quick, bing bada boom. Soften that up. So now we're taking our bigger smudger and we're going to be doing this. You see this motion? Top, and then we're pulling almost like in a half circle. And as opposed to doing this, going straight up and down, you see the difference. And what this is doing is this is how we make sure that we convey that underlying form, right? With minimal effort. Because we also want to make sure what we're doing when we first lay down that charcoal, because if we're spending too much time erasing, all of a sudden what we're doing is we're overworking the paper, right? So just keep that in mind. But now I'm just taking this and I'm building up this lip. I want there to be a nice, soft, implied line right here. Almost more shadow work than anything, right? But this is how I want to bring out that round lip. Hit it real light with the brush. Real light with the brush. Then I'm just going in here with my mono zero eraser and I'm just looking at my reference image and I'm retrieving all the areas that need to have a higher value. So there are some wrinkles and stuff in this lower lip that where we can bring out some high values. Okay. Then I'm just taking my medium charcoal here and I'm just going through and just bringing out all those lower values, right? All right, now this is the fun part. Notice how there's all those hairs? And here's something that I like to do for drawings. You'll notice that in the reference image, these are inherently lighter values, right? All these little bits of hair, growing on the lip of this chimp. Well, when it comes to the black and white scale, I have found that it is easier and, in my opinion, aesthetically is more pleasing if you bring out those higher value, like whiskers, as a low value, right? Which is why I hit them with the medium charcoal and really brought them out. But that's personal preference. You don't have to do that if you don't want to. That's just something that I like. Okay, now here I'm just building up those lower values. And you can see how with just a couple quick strokes of your brush, you can change the overall look of your drawing very quickly. Very quickly. Okay. So that's looking good. I'm liking how this is turning out. So now I'm just loading up my number 6. And you'll know that you're fully loaded when you go to tap your tone and you have bits, flakes of charcoal hit the paper. That's when you know your brush is fully loaded. Okay. So now what we're doing is, you see all that hair that's coming off the side of the chimp? Well, we're doing our base layer. Remember how when we first started this drawing, we had the base layer with all of our soft charcoal? Well, we're doing the exact same thing here. And if you'll notice, even in base layering, we want to target our lower values first. And the cool thing about the brush, I've mentioned this in other tutorials, I don't think I've mentioned it here yet, is that when you are fully loaded with charcoal, with your brush, when you first hit the paper, that's when you are going to be conveying your lowest values. And then as you work the brush, there's less and less charcoal on the brush, and because of that, you are going to be conveying a slightly higher and higher value. So that's another reason why you want to target low values first. You'll thank yourself in the long run. So, but now here, as I did with both eyes, I'm erasing my outline of the ear and I'm re-solidifying it now that I have a lot of the drawing to gauge my proportions on. I'm just going through and retrieving the higher values. This is a layer of the hair, being conscious of length of the hair, direction of the hair. You see that just like that. This is a very awesome trick, being able to retrieve those higher values with your mono zero eraser. This is where the magic happens. But just pay attention to the flow. Pay attention to the flow of the hair in your reference image. Flow and length. Those are the two big things, flow and length. Okay, so now we're going to get started on that ear. So I want to take my number 2 smudger and I want to make sure that it's loaded up. And I am going to start with my lower values. Now, one of the things you're going to notice on this chimp's ear is that when you look at the reference image, the most of the ear is very dark, like very, very low in value. And so I'm going to show you kind of a trick, or more or less an approach that you can use when dealing with a certain portion of your reference image that has so much of one type of value that there's very little value relationship going on there. Value relationship, of course, being the dynamic shared between a low value immediately next to a mid or high value, right? So here what we want to do is we still want to build up where the lower values would inherently be, but at the same time, if we want to stay as true as we can to the reference image, we also want to make sure that there is some subtle difference in tonal value here. So now we're going to do this. We're going to blend this all together, soften it up. Don't worry about the line work here. I'm gonna solidify that here shortly. Okay, now here with the medium charcoal, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to run a nice defined line right along the edge of this ear. And this is just to really, really bring out the edge, right, of where that ear ends. And then in here, if you look closely at the reference image, there is a slight defined line here. But the overall form of the chimp's ear is going to be implied for the most part. So we're going to convey those tonal differences with our smudger work and our eraser work to come. But now here what I'm doing is you're going to want to take your 3/16 smudger, remember pinpoint control, and just run it right along that line. And this will give you a nice blend, and this will just make the ear look a little bit more wholesome. There's not going to be such a definite separation between defined line and the rest of it. And then here we're going in with our Model 0 eraser, and we're just retrieving some higher values. And this is where you can really start to bring out just some form, you know. And because the ear of this chimp is so dark, you can make your ear look pretty much, you know, however you want, right? But then as you can see, if you want to go ahead after you've retrieved your higher values and you want to blend your ear with a brush, you can do that. Okay, so now here, if you look at the reference image, we do have some ear hair. Oh, yes, we have some ear hair, and so we're just hitting this with, and this is a hard charcoal, right? We wouldn't want to do that with a medium or a soft charcoal because it wouldn't give us tight lines. We want to make sure that our lines are nice and tight. So, and then here, we're just going through like we did with the other hair texture. We're adding a layer of hard charcoal. And you can see just with a couple of strokes of the pencil, all of a sudden we're really starting to bring out the texture that we see here in the reference image. And this isn't the only trick when it comes to the hair. I'm going to show you a trick that you can use when it comes to your brush to really make this look accurate. And then here, we just want to pull the ear hair from the ear, and this will keep us from accidentally messing up that defined line that we put in on top of the ear with our medium charcoal. But that's the thing with hair, is just take your time. Individual strokes, especially when it comes to hair like this, where it's not so much like fluffy soft as it is more coarse, right? And less hair. Just take your time. And just make sure that when you're doing your hair texture, when you go to pull with your hard charcoal, that you're very just deliberate, just like right here, and just pull it. That's it. Okay. So now, this is that trick. So check this out. I'm just gonna hit it real quick. And what this does, if you look at the reference image, you see how there's actual value changes within the hair itself. Well, that's from shadowing within the hair with how the hair lays on itself. So that's a really quick way that you can bring out a lower value because of the way the hair lays on itself with your brush. So you can do it here, do it there. See that? Just anywhere where you need a lower value. That's the trick with the brush right there. That'll definitely help. Okay, so here we're just gonna take our number 2 smudger. We're just gonna pull this. We've got our line, now we're gonna pull down from the line. See that? Boom. Hit it with our brush, real light. Nice. Hard charcoal. Fuzzy Wuzzy was a bear. I think Fuzzy was a chimp. A chimpanzee. Okay, now, so we got that with our hard charcoal. Take our brush and continue to build up any of these lower values with the ear and with the shoulder of the chimpanzee here. Okay, and then I'm just retrieving some high values, doing some cross hatching right here for the skin. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to cheat a little bit. I'm going to follow those lines that I just laid down and cross hatch with my hard charcoal. See how quickly that changed for that entire portion of the chimp's face. It's just subtle little tricks like that. So much of the time when people draw things, they think that they need to draw it exactly like it is. I mean, don't get me wrong, for the longest time, especially after the Renaissance, that was a big thing, is people wanted to draw things absolutely picture perfect. And they accomplished that with photorealistic type drawing. I prefer this type of drawing. Just draw because you want to have fun. Draw because you want to, discover new techniques and new ways of doing things. I'm not trying to draw my drawings picture perfect, and unless that's a goal for yourself, and if you're just starting out, have fun, man. Life's too short, just have fun. And here we are, I'm just going through and blending this. This has turned out pretty good for the most part. And that's the thing with a drawing like this, is the more time you spend on it, obviously, the better it's going to look. But like, say here, this chin, for example, I'm just going to go ahead. I've loaded my brushwork up, and I'm just kind of solidifying this bottom chin here. There we are. Okay. Now I'm just taking my Ohuhu eraser, and I'm referring back to portions of the drawing that I did before, and I'm just going through and I'm picking up things that I missed, or maybe things that I think I could improve upon, right? But as you can see here with my medium charcoal, I'm just going through on top of the hard charcoal that I laid down, and it just gives the skin another layer. It makes those creases look like they're deeper into the skin, right? And this plays to that third dimension, that three-dimensional form, which is what separates, a good artist from a great artist. So just make sure that you're using those techniques. And then in here, there's some texture on the forehead, but it's more grainy and gritty than anything. So what I want to do is I'm taking my medium charcoal and I'm standing it on its side, and I'm just pulling. It's real light. I'm not pushing hard at all. And boom, there we go. Now we have that grittiness. Hit it with the brush real quick, real light. We have that same texture and the grittiness of the forehead that we see in the reference image. And then the Monozoa eraser too, if you don't have an Ohuhu eraser, or if maybe you don't like it, the Monozoa eraser will do the same type of thing. Main difference between those two is that the Ohuhu will allow you to move a lot quicker, and when you touch the paper, it lifts it. You don't have to push very hard at all, as you do with the Ohuhu eraser. So okay, so now I'm just taking my 3/16 smudger, and I just want to build up this lip just a little more. Blend some of this fur. That's looking pretty good. And then here, if you want to go ahead and you want to build these creases up with your medium charcoal pencil again, you can do that. When it comes to the creases on a monkey or a chimpanzee or an ape, the medium charcoal will make the crease or the wrinkle in the skin look like it's an actual deeper crease than, say, if you were to put that same line down with a hard charcoal. So just keep that in mind. I mean, detail work's one of those things where you can spend hours with your detail work. Most of my drawings that I do that are commissions for clients are anywhere from 12 to 18 hours of actual chair time. So, but when it comes to these tutorials, I can't do the drawing complete justice like I would like to in the wake of all the techniques and everything that I do, but we're crunched for time. It's like, how can you squeeze 15 hours of drawing into an hour and a half class? So it's looking pretty good for now. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm just gonna bring this arm in a little bit. You know, in other news, we have partnered up with Skillshare. So I have close to half a dozen different classes now where I am teaching my step-by-step 3-layered method when it comes to drawing pet portraits. So we already have a German Shepherd class, we have a French Bulldog class, a Labrador Retriever class. I'll have a link to Skillshare in the description of this video. And don't forget, I also have my Patreon site. So for $2 a month, you get to participate in monthly poll voting where I ask you guys what you would like to see me draw next. For $5 a month, you get early access to all of my YouTube videos. And for $10 a month, I offer monthly drawing consultations as well. So I hope you learned 1 or 2 things in this video, and good luck in your future drawings.